Hello, in this presentation we will track and pay bills within QuickBooks Online. We will have a comprehensive QuickBooks Online course soon, if not available yet. We also have a comprehensive Excel course which complements the QuickBooks courses and a QuickBooks Pro desktop version course you can find at the link below. Here we are in the QuickBooks Online dashboard. We will be continuing with the Get Great Guitars problem. We're going to be paying the bills and tracking those bills to which we want to pay. So in order to do that, we're going to select this plus icon up top and go through the normal bill paying options we have here. And this is when we're going to be dealing with the vendors section. So we've got these vendors. These, of course, vendors being a name for who we are paying. That's why we're going to include them in this section. Typically, when we pay the vendors, we often use a check to pay them if we're going to pay them directly. But it's often useful to write the bills and then pay the bills at a later time with a check typically. But when we go through this process, the enter the bills and then paying the bills, we're entering the bills more close to the time that we actually consumed whatever it is that we are using. For example, if we're going to enter the bill for the utility bill, when we get the bill, we can put it in at the point in time we get it, even if we're not going to pay for it until a month later. And therefore, QuickBooks will record the bill and the related expense closer to the period in time that we actually consume the utilities, which is better in accordance with the accrual process. Entering the bills first also allows us to look through those bills and have them all in the system and track which ones we need to really pay first and track which ones we're going to pay. So the difference between these two then would be that if we write a check, of course, it would decrease the checking account and record the other side, in our example, the utilities bill. If we put it into the bill first, then it's going to increase the accounts payable, a liability account, and the other side of it will be the expense. In our case, in our example, the utilities expense. And then we'll pay the bill, which in essence is just writing a check. But the difference between paying a bill and writing a check, or just selecting write check and paying the bills, is that when we select pay bills, we can have multiple checks that we're going to, in essence, write at the same time rather than writing check by check. So what we're going to imagine here, what we're saying is we already entered some bills. Now we're going to see those bills we have entered and decide which ones of those we would like to pay. So we're going to select the pay bills. So pay bills looks something like this. We're typically going to pay from the checking account, so we are going to write a check. When we say pay bills, we mean we're going to write checks, but it usually means we're going to write multiple checks for bills that have already been entered into the system. So when we see this item here, it means that the accounts payable typically is going to go down. We're going to write these from the payable. Even if we're paying the phone bill, we're not going to write an expense to the phone expense because we already did that. We did that when we entered the bill. What we're going to do is reduce the amount we owe, reduce the payable amount when we pay the bill. And then of course the other side is going to be where it's going to be paid from, typically the checking account. So checking account, we're going to say the date here is going to be the date of these 02/21/21, February 21st, 2021. The check number should start automatically. Now note we could have a ton of bills here depending on what type of industry we are at, and we could be selecting 10 bills that we're going to pay at this point. But this is going to give us the lead number of the checks, and all the checks after that will follow. Now, if we're going to print the checks, then we just need the lead number because the checks will still have the numbers on it. We'll still have to get pre-printed checks with pre-printed numbers. And then we'll print the checks and all the other checks will follow that number as they print, and they'll all be in the same number and order. If, however, we're writing something like from a checkbook and then just entering the data into the system here, meaning we're not actually generating the checks or printing the checks as we record the system, then we may want to just go in and manually put in these numbers because it might not record them all in the same order. But so keep that in mind as we go. We're not going to print the checks in the example problem because we're not going to print the checks here. So then we have these two items here. This is going to be the due dates. So this gives us a nice check, and if we could change the ordering by selecting this item. And the due dates is usually a good one we're going to want to change order by, or obviously the balance due would be a good one to order it by. And we're going to pay these basically one at a time. We're going to pay the fender first. So this is going to be this item. If we're going to just pay the entire amount, we're just going to say that we want to pay the 168. If we want to make a partial payment, we can put whatever the partial payment is, and it'll keep the balance that will be due. We see a quick calculation of our new balance down here in terms of the checking account. So when we're going to do this one at a time, we could check them both off, and it would generate 2 checks as we record this. We're going to do this just one at a time at this point, and then take a look at what happens. So what's going to happen here, of course, is the accounts payable is going to go down because we're paying a bill, and the other side of it is going to be cash, which is going down because we're in essence writing a check. So let's save and print, and we'll see what happens. So we're going to close. I'm going to close this out. And if we were to print this, we would have to, put the checks into the printer the proper way and print those out. We're going to close this out. We're going to go to the financial statements. So let's go to the financial statements on the left side. We're going to go to the balance sheet. We're going to change the dates from 02/01/21 to 02/28/21, February 1st, 2021 to February 28th, 2021, and run that report. If we now scroll down, we're going to scroll down to the accounts payable. So here's the accounts payable account. We've got 1,200 in it. If we look at the activity, we're going to select that item. Look at the activity. We see this bill payment. So bill payment with a check here. And that is for this amount, this 168. If we select that item, then we see the pay bill to print here, and so this is going to be what we selected in terms of the bill. Note the pay bill screen may look a little bit different than the screen we used to enter the information, meaning we have the name up here rather than just a list of checks to check off, because now we're looking at it really just as one individual bill that was paid, one individual bill paid, as opposed to a screen that we can check off multiple bills to be paid at one time. So we won't, sometimes when we go back to these forms, the form may not look exactly like the input form we used because of the format of the input form. The input form we used here being one, where we could check off multiple bills, as opposed to this one just showing us that detail for the one bill that we checked off. So we're going to close this back out. We're going to go back to the report up top. We're going to go back to the report. And so those are going to be, the other side of that, of course, is the checking account. Within the checking account, this 104,625, if we scroll down, we have this check that was written for 168. If we select that item, then here is our check. And I'm going to uncheck this print later, and it'll give us our check number there. So I'm going to uncheck this number to give us the check number because we won't be printing the checks. So we're going to just save and new, and yes, and that'll give us our item there. Going back to the dashboard up top, we're now at the dashboard. One other area it might be useful to look at this is the check register. So the registers can be useful to look at this information. So we could go to the accounting down at the bottom here. And this gives us our list of accounts. And if we want to see the detail here in any of these accounts, the checking account is often ones that we're kind of used to seeing a register format from writing checks and whatnot. Many of us, at least, are probably used to a register format. This looks kind of like our bank statement, or if we look at an online checking account, then it gives us kind of this register format, this running balance, which looks similar to a general ledger. And that'll give us there's our balance there again, 168, and our check number, it's a pay bill. So this is another area that some people may find easier than going back and forth to their reports. So we could have registers. I'm going to go back for all the accounts here. So if we went to the accounts payable, all the balance sheet accounts at least, we go back to the accounts payable. It's not as normal for most people, for a lot of people, I guess, to see the same register format here, but it's going to be similar to a trial balance. So if we select the register here in the accounts payable, there's the 168 showing the paid amount here. So that's another location. Oftentimes it's really helpful for the cash account to look at the register. Many people find that a useful tool, but many of the registers, if you get used to looking at the registers, that could be useful. Going back and forth to the reports to seeing what is happening is also, of course, something I highly recommend doing, so we make sure we know what is being input when we input it.